This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show.
Well, I'm always envious of your pictures that you put up on LinkedIn with the ocean picture. So cool. Well, let's talk about defining that role, because too many people, they don't do that. They don't define what success is. So whenever you give the definition of here's what sales enablement is, why don't we start there? Because I mean, so many people just throw out everything. Oh, it's an infographic. Oh, it's a this, it's a that. It's a technology only. So why don't we start there with what's your definition of sales enablement?
Yeah, I love it. I think that it's almost, for me, it's more a guiding ethos, right? I believe that the role of sales enablement is to represent the voice of the field and voice of the customer, and to empower these human beings, our corporate athletes, while they undertake one of the most stressful and demanding jobs in the organization, hard stop. And with the knowledge that when sellers win, everyone wins. And so I think another piece that's important, or that I like to highlight, is what falls under the scope of sales enablement and what does not. What does not, I think a lot of the operations, right? So like the tech stack, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've done my fair share of trainings for product launches, and also like, driving adoption for a new pipeline tracking tool. But I think that that's more RevOps. For me, I think it's the content that you're creating internally and externally, whether it's a training, an internal podcast, playbooks as a great example. It's also your processes, right? So I've got a green belt in process design. And so one of my favorite things to do is to look at what's the current state of what's happening right now, and to find those gaps and look for the opportunity areas. And then of course, training and coaching, I think also falls squarely under sales enablement. And that, for the record, includes new manager coaching as well, which is a massive gap that I see on a lot of sales floors right now.
Wow. Okay. So I wasn't considering that at all. So you're not talking sales enablement as necessarily being the technology side at all. You're saying, hey, that should live over in the RevOps side. You're really talking about content creation, training. I want to hit what an internal podcast is, because I've not heard of that terminology before. And you also talked about process, training, and coaching. I said training twice there, son of a gun. So let's hit the internal podcast. What exactly is that?
Okay, so when you think about the medium, right, we hear a lot of talk about people using video during their sales motions, right? Video, email, social, these are just channels. The podcast is a phenomenal channel to enable and empower the sales team. But to your point, it's very new, right? Most people, when they think podcast, they think of external podcast. But there are some pretty exquisite ways to actually create some internal podcasts and then push them to, the streaming apps. So where people are already listening to their podcast. So you don't have to deal with that behavior change aspect. Now, why does this channel, why does this medium, why is this an exceptional fit for sales enablement? I think the first one, and the most important one, is it meets sellers where they're at, right? They're on the move. And it also untethers learning from sitting at your fucking computer. I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this show, but and so when you think about it from the be more inclusive or the neurodivergent, ADHD is one example, we have to be moving while we're learning. It's very difficult to consume and retain new information while you're sitting still. And so from that perspective, it's a win, but also the caliber of attention that you're able to get through the podcast. It just trumps anything else. Like, take video as one example. When you are watching a video on YouTube or in your sales enablement platform, be it HighSpot, Seismic, MindTickle, whatever, you probably, if you're like me, you've got a bunch of other tabs open and you're playing in Slack and you're checking emails as they come in. But when you're listening to a podcast, you tend to be more into a routine. So you're walking the dog, you're driving the kids to school, you're, like doing dishes. I was just listening to your show, Bryan, doing some dishes. And so the caliber of attention that you get is a lot richer. And so the knowledge that you're able to push, I mean, it's stickier. And I think it's half the cost of video production. So that's like a win right there. And you're able to democratize the voices on the team. So let's say you're doing a conversation series with top performers or a best practices series. You're giving your people the opportunity to learn best from the group inside the organization, where most sellers actually learn the most from, and that is from their peers. So with that, I'm going to pause.
No, I appreciate that. So this does not live in your LMS. You're suggesting that you do this through, just push it out to like a Spotify or something like that?
Precisely.
Okay.
That's a choice, right? That an organization can make, but it's like all things with change, right? Sales is always changing. Are you? A lot of the learning platforms, even like outside of sales enablement, like a Degree, they weren't built to facilitate the podcast medium yet. Mm-hmm. The feature set really hasn't caught up yet. And so there's, that's a thing. But I think it's important also for an organization to look at how their content is being consumed right now, right? What percentage of your organization is already going to your learning platform to consume information? How frequently is that happening?
Is the answer all the time.
Exactly. And so in many ways, you can just bypass all of that at the beginning. But these are certainly conversations that we have during the planning phase of our projects and these internal podcast launches.